The arrival of the feared one. The stars outside the space station blinked like quiet eyes watching from a distance. It was a calm night above planet Virion 7, where the Alliance outpost floated silently in orbit. Inside the command room, alarms suddenly lit up. Red lights flashed across the walls as the sensors picked something unusual nearby. A large dark object was moving slowly in space, drifting without any signal or communication. Commander Lin gave the order to scan the object. It was a damaged ship, old and nearly destroyed. No one knew where it came from. It had no markings, no flag, and no records in any database. The scans showed only one life form inside, still alive but weak. The body temperature was unstable. The energy levels were off the charts. It was something the system had never seen before. Fear started to spread among the crew. Some thought it was a trap. Others believed it was a weapon floating toward them. The decision was made quickly. Bring the ship in. Lock it down. Study the creature inside. The ship was pulled in using mechanical arms. Smoke came out of its broken sides. The rescue team wore heavy suits and approached with caution. Inside, they found her. A figure unlike anything they had ever seen. Her body was tall and slim, almost like a human, but her skin was glowing with a soft silver blue light. Strange patterns moved slowly across her skin like they were alive. Her eyes were closed, but her face showed no pain, only calm silence. They placed her in a glass chamber in the lower level of the outpost. Scientists, doctors, and leaders came from all over the Alliance to look at her. None dared to go near without strong security. Rumors spread quickly. Some said she was a lost weapon from an ancient war. Others said she was a living energy bomb. The people called her the Echo because she did not speak. She only looked at the world with silent eyes, reflecting pain and distance. The outpost became quiet and tense. No one liked being near her room. The glass chamber was strong, made to hold the most dangerous beings. Guards were placed around it day and night. Lights were dimmed. Everything was silent. She stayed inside, sitting in one corner, watching the world outside like a ghost. One person, however, did not feel fear. His name was Ray. He was a simple technician who worked the night shifts. His job was to keep the systems running, fix broken lights, and check temperature controls. Ray had seen her many times through the glass, but something inside him said she was not dangerous. She looked lonely, not deadly. Every night, Ray walked past her chamber, while others avoided eye contact. He looked straight at her. He nodded gently and moved on. One night, while checking a broken panel near her chamber, he saw her sitting quietly again, hands folded, head low. He felt something in his chest. Not fear, not curiosity. Just a quiet pull, like a whisper calling out for kindness. He came back. The next night, and the next, always during his shift. Sometimes he would leave a small object on the table near the glass. A folded paper with a drawing, a music chip with soft notes, a tiny handmade star. She never touched them, but she noticed. Slowly, the light in her eyes changed. Not much, just a little softer. Ray never told anyone. He knew people would be angry or scared, but he kept going. Sometimes he would sit across from her chamber during break time and just talk. He talked about Earth, about growing up near the ocean, about his little brother who always wanted to touch the stars. She never answered, but she listened. Ray could tell. Days passed. One evening, Ray left a simple flower near the glass. It was made of wire and metal, shaped with care. He placed it there and turned to leave. For the first time she moved. She stood up and walked to the glass. Slowly, she placed her hand on it. Ray turned, surprised. Without thinking, he stepped closer and placed his hand on the other side. There was a moment of stillness. No alarms, no panic, just quiet. Her eyes looked into his deep, tired, sad. But there was a light there too. A small light that said, I see you. That night, Ray could not sleep. His thoughts were full of questions. Who was she really? Why was she feared by everyone? What had she been through? He did not believe the stories about her being a weapon. Weapon looks at the world like that. The next morning, the chief scientist called a meeting. They had finished running energy tests. The results were strange. Her body held a type of energy not known to any species. Strong, unstable, maybe even dangerous. The council decided she would be moved to a research facility on a far moon, where she could be studied without risk. Some spoke of breaking her apart to understand how she worked. Ray heard all this from a hallway nearby. His chest tightened. They were going to take her away, like she was a machine. Like she was nothing. He looked down at his hands. The same. Hands that had touched hers through the glass. He made a decision then, a quiet one. He would not let her be forgotten. He would not let them treat her like an object. He had seen something in her no scan could measure. He had seen her soul. The story was only beginning, but Ray knew one thing already. The universe had feared what she was. He would be the one to see who she truly is. Eyes that didn't look away. The sun over Virion 7 never rose or set the way it did on Earth. The outpost circled the planet in constant motion, passing through long shadows and soft golden light again and again. Inside the lower deck, where silence stayed like a shadow, the glass chamber held its lonely guest. She sat still in her corner, back straight, eyes open. She did not blink often. She only watched. Ray walked into the hallway, holding a small container in his hand. It was his dinner, but he had no hunger tonight. He looked at the floor, then slowly raised his eyes to the glass. She was already looking at him, no surprise there. She always looked before he did, like she sensed his presence before his footsteps touched the ground. He walked closer, slowly and calmly. No rush, no fear. He sat down on the floor near the glass, crossed his legs, and leaned against the cold metal wall. The hum of the station filled the space between them. He placed his dinner to the side and took out a thin notebook. He opened it and began to draw. Lines shaped into trees, hills, and stars. He showed the drawing to the glass. She tilted her head slightly. Her eyes moved from one corner of the page to the other. Then she lifted her hand. With one finger, she touched the glass gently and began to trace something. Ray watched carefully. Her lines matched his drawing, only backward. She was drawing it from the other side, copying every stroke with perfect memory. A quiet smile appeared on Ray's face. Not a big one, just enough to say, "I see what you did." He turned the page and drew a small boat on a river. She did not copy it this time. She looked at it for a long moment, then moved her hand away. Ray closed the notebook and sat still. He looked at her and spoke softly. "I don't think you're a monster." She gave no answer. Her expression stayed calm, but her eyes blinked. Slowly once, he continued, "Everyone else is scared of you. They say you're dangerous. They say you were made for war. I don't believe that." She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were long, and the light in her skin pulsed gently, like a wave. She raised her eyes again and locked onto his. "Why did they call you Echo?" Ray asked. She said nothing. Her lips never moved. Still, her eyes held something deep. Something older than language. That night, Ray left the notebook and pencil on a small shelf near the chamber. He hoped she would use them. Maybe one day she would draw something of her own. The next day, the council met again. Leaders from different planets joined by screen. They spoke in heavy tones, sharing reports and data. Words like unstable energy, unknown origin, biological threat were used again and again. No one spoke of the way she sat in silence. No one mentioned her gentle touch on the glass or the sadness in her eyes. Ray listened from behind the security room wall. He had no voice in the meeting, only permission to manage power systems. Still, His heart burned with each word they said. Not one of them had spent even 10 seconds in her presence. When the meeting ended, Ray returned to the chamber. He found the notebook open and a new drawing inside. It was not perfect, but it was clear. She had drawn him. His face, sitting on the floor, notebook in hand. The drawing was soft and careful. He looked at it for a long time, then looked at her. She was sitting again, hands on her knees. "Thank you," he said. The next few nights, Ray brought her stories. Not books, not videos, just words spoken from memory. He told her about his father who fixed old ships in a scrapyard. He shared a story about the time he and his brother tried to fly a homemade drone into the mountains and crashed it. He described Earth sunsets, blue skies, and the smell of warm food in small kitchens. Sometimes she closed her eyes while he spoke. Other times she looked straight at him without blinking. Ray began to feel like he was speaking to someone real, someone listening deeply. One night, he brought a small speaker. He played soft music from Earth, old classical tunes that floated in the air like feathers. She leaned slightly forward when the first notes played. Her fingers tapped the glass very gently in rhythm. Ray smiled. "You like music?" She gave the smallest nod. It was quick, but it was their dot behind the scenes. Trouble was building. Some guards complained that Ray was getting too close. The head of security warned him not to return to her chamber without written permission. He nodded, politely, but ignored the warning. He came back the next night. That night, she did something new. She stood and placed both her hands on the glass. Ray stood too. He mirrored her pose. Their eyes locked. No one spoke. No sound filled the air. The lights in her skin glowed brighter than before. Not in a wild or dangerous way, but like warmth in the middle of winter. She opened her mouth. A soft voice came out. It was low, unsure, like learning to walk for the first time. "You are not afraid?" Ray shook his head. "No, never." She closed her eyes for a long time, then opened them again. Something had changed. He leaned closer. "What is your name?" She hesitated. Then, very quietly, she said, "Lyra." Ray repeated it softly. "Lyra, that's a beautiful name." No one else on the station knew she had spoken. No one knew she had a name. But for Ray, everything had changed. She was not the echo. She was Lyra, a living being. A person. He left that night with a heart full of fire. He knew the others would never understand unless they saw what he had seen. Not fear, not threat, not danger, only pain, and the quiet hope of someone waiting to be seen. Whispers through the glass, the station lights dimmed as night cycles began. Most crew members had gone to their quarters. Only a few remained at their posts. Ray sat alone in the observation room, staring at the report on his screen. His name had been mentioned in the latest meeting notes. Some council members believed he had become emotionally attached to the subject. Others called it dangerous behavior. One official even suggested removing him from duty. Ray closed the report without finishing it. His mind was not on the rules. It was on Lyra. The name still echoed in his thoughts like music. He whispered it again under his breath. Lyra, a name meant for someone real. Someone alive. He stood up and walked to the chamber hallway. The guards were not at their post. A shift change was happening. The hallway was empty for a moment. Ray stepped forward and placed his hand gently on the glass. Lyra was already awake. She looked at him with calm eyes. Her silver blue skin pulsed softly with light. He smiled. "I missed you today." She responded with a small smile of her own. It was barely there, but it was enough to bring warmth to his chest. He sat down on the floor and placed a small device near the glass, the same music player from before. He pressed the button, and soft melodies filled the air. She closed her eyes for a few seconds and opened them again. "Tell me more," she said. Ray blinked. Her voice still sounded new, still unsure, but more confident than before. More about what? She tilted her head. Stories, the ones you told before. Ray smiled. He began to speak again. This time he told her about the Begu. Stars above Earth. How people used to gather on rooftops just to look at the sky. He talked about the old cities with buildings that touched the clouds. He described small villages where people smiled at strangers and shared food during festivals. His voice stayed low and warm. Lyra listened without interrupting. She sat close to the glass, both hands resting on her knees. Her eyes stayed fixed on Ray the whole time. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway opened. A high-ranking officer stepped in with 2 guards. His name was Colonel Maddox. He was known for his strict behavior and zero tolerance for breaking protocol. Ray stood up quickly. Sir, I was just checking the chamber systems. Maddox looked at him without emotion. You were not given clearance to interact with the subject after hours. Ray nodded slowly. I understand, but I believe she is not a threat. I have evidence. She understands language. She responds with kindness. Maddox stepped closer. That is not your decision to make. You are a technician, not a scientist. You are dismissed from this area until further notice. Ray wanted to argue but held himself back. He looked at Lyra one last time. She had stood up and was watching the scene quietly. Her face showed no fear, but her glow had faded slightly. Ray left the hallway without another word. He felt a heavy weight on his chest. He knew they would not stop there. The council had made its choice. They saw Lyra as a puzzle to solve or a weapon to control. The next day, Ray tried to send a report to the scientific board. He included every interaction he had with Lyra. He mentioned her voice, her drawings, her reactions to stories and music. He explained how her behavior never once showed aggression. But the report was blocked before it reached the higher channels. Someone did not want his voice to be heard. Later that week, preparations began to move Lyra to a different facility. The council had approved her transfer. The new facility was located on a cold moon with no population nearby. It was a place where mistakes could be buried without questions. Ray overheard this news from 2 security officers during lunch. His hands clenched around his cup until it cracked. He rushed to the lower deck hoping to see her one last time. Guards were standing firm at the doors now. No one without clearance could enter. Ray tried to reason with them, but it was useless. He walked back to the tech room and sat in silence. His thoughts were full of images, her hand on the glass. Her soft voice, her first smile, her drawing in the notebook. He opened the notebook again and touched the page where she had drawn him. A single word came to his lips. No. He could not let them take her away. Not like this. Not after everything. She had shown trust. She had chosen to open up. She had chosen to speak. That night, Ray waited for the station to sleep. He slipped past the cameras using his maintenance access. Every corner of the outpost had secret paths known only to the engineers. He reached the observation deck and entered. Through the ceiling hatch, Lyra was sitting again. She looked tired. Her light was dimmer than usual. When she saw Ray, her eyes opened wider. You came back, she said softly. He nodded and stepped closer to the glass. They are going to move you. I don't know where, but it will not be safe. Her head lowered slightly. I know. Ray's heart ached. Why are you not fighting this? She raised her eyes. Because I have fought before. It only made them fear me more. He felt anger rise in his chest. Then let me fight for you. She blinked slowly. Why? Ray placed his palm on the glass. Because I see you, not what they say you are. Not what the scans show. I see you. And you matter to me. Lyra stepped closer and placed her hand opposite his. A soft warmth spread through the glass. It was not painful. It felt like light touching. Water. Thank you, she whispered. That moment stayed still. The station could have fallen around them, and neither would have moved. Two souls from different worlds connected by one truth. The need to be seen. The need to be understood. Suddenly the alarms blared through the speakers. Red lights flashed once again. But this time it was not a scan alert. It was a system failure warning. Ray looked around in shock. The power lines were flickering. The gravity control stuttered. Something was wrong. Lyra turned her head toward the far wall. Her skin began to glow stronger. She looked at Ray with calm eyes. "Something is coming," she said. Ray reached for his tools. "Then we face it together." The storm breaks. The station shook with a loud noise as the alarm screamed through every hallway. Lights blinked and screens turned red. People ran from one corner to another. No one knew exactly what had happened. Systems were failing one by one. Oxygen levels were dropping in certain sections. Communication with the command tower was cut. The station had never faced such a sudden and wide failure before. Ray rushed out of the observation deck. He moved fast through narrow service paths that only engineers used. Pipes rattled above his head, and sparks flew from broken panels. His boots echoed on the metal floor. He reached the power control room and began checking the main grid. Something had overloaded the core systems. It was not a natural failure. It looked like sabotage. A second shockwave hit the station. The floor vibrated beneath his feet. Ray grabbed the nearest support beam to stay balanced. A loud cracking noise followed. One of the side fuel tanks had ruptured. Fire alerts began to flash in red across the monitors. The station was in real danger now. Ray grabbed his COM device and tried to contact the main bridge. No signal came through. He tried emergency frequencies but found only static. He slammed the device on the desk in frustration. He knew one thing. If the energy core melted down, it would destroy half the station. Many people would die, and Lyra would be blamed again. Even if she had nothing to do with it, he had no time left. He ran back toward the lower deck. Guards were no longer at their posts. Everyone had run toward safety or repair zones. Smoke had filled the hallways. The air tasted like burning wires. Ray pulled his shirt over his nose and reached the chamber doors. Inside the glass room, Lyra was standing still. Her eyes were glowing brighter than ever. Her skin shimmered with lines of light that moved across her body. Ray opened the access panel and shut off the emergency locks. The door to her chamber opened with a hiss. For the first time since her arrival, she was free from the glass prison. She looked at him. Her eyes showed no fear. "I can stop it," she said. Ray blinked. "What do you mean? The core is damaged." "If I reach it, I can absorb the energy before it breaks." Ray shook his head. "You could die," Lyra stepped forward. "If I do, nothing more will die. Let me help." Ray hesitated for a moment, but then gave a small nod. He led her through the maintenance tunnels. The heat was rising fast. Pipes burst as they moved. Flames licked the walls in certain places. Lyra raised her hand and waves of cool energy moved from her fingers. The fire pulled back as if afraid of her touch. They reached the core chamber. The control rods were shaking. The main valve had melted. Energy sparks flew in every direction. No human could walk into that room without being torn apart. Lyra stepped forward. Ray shouted for her to stop. "You do not have to do this." She turned to face him. "I want to." Then she walked into the chamber. Light swallowed her form. Rays of energy shot toward her like lightning bolts. She raised both hands and absorbed them one by one. Her skin glowed white, then blue, then silver. She stood still as the energy rushed into her body. The machines groaned and screamed. The station itself shook again. Ray fell to the floor as a wave of wind rushed past. Lights flickered, then went out. For a moment there was only darkness. Then silence. No alarms, no shaking. No fire. Ray slowly stood up. He looked into the core room. The energy had stopped moving. The rods were stable again. The warning signs had vanished from the screens, but Lyra was lying on the floor. Her body was still. The light in her skin had faded. She looked pale and cold. Ray ran to her side. He knelt and lifted her head gently. She was breathing, but very slow. Her eyes remained closed. He whispered to her, "You did it. You saved them. Please stay with me." Her lips moved, but no sound came. He held her close and waited. It took 3 hours for the emergency systems to return. Medical teams arrived and carried Lyra to the health bay. The council gathered again. This time they did not speak with fear. They spoke with confusion. A weapon had just saved their lives. A creature they wanted to study had saved their entire outpost. Ray stood before them and told everything. He shared the drawings, the voice recordings, the moment she gave her name. He showed how she had risked her life to stop the meltdown. He explained that her energy was never meant for harm. It was healing energy. It only became unstable when she was locked and treated like a threat. Some council members argued. They still held doubts, but others listened with new eyes. One of the scientists spoke in support. Another member shared her view. Slowly the room changed, not fully, not easily. But change had started. By evening the message had spread. Across planets and stations the story traveled. A being once feared had saved hundreds. And a human had believed in her before anyone else. Ray sat beside her in the medical room. Machines beeped softly around her. She had not woken up yet, but her breathing was steady now. A nurse placed a warm blanket over her. Ray looked at her face. He remembered the way she smiled that first time, the way she traced his drawings, the way she whispered his name with quiet trust. She was not Echo. She was Lyra, and she had become the heart of a story no one could forget. She is more than they feared. A quiet breeze moved through the garden deck of the Central Recovery Station. The flowers planted in rows swayed gently under the artificial sunlight. Birds flown in from different worlds chirped softly from metal branches designed to resemble real trees. It was a place built for healing and peace. Not many visitors came here. Only those allowed by the council. Ray sat on a wooden bench near the water stream that ran across the garden path. He had been coming every day for 2 weeks. Not once had he missed a day. He always arrived early in the morning and stayed until late evening. Sometimes he read. Sometimes he just sat in silence. And sometimes he waited with hope in his heart. Today, his hope was answered. The door behind him slid open with a soft sound. Light footsteps followed. Ray stood up and turned around. Lyra had entered the garden. Her walk was slow but steady. Her skin still glowed, though softer than before. She wore simple white clothing given by the station. Her silver blue patterns moved gently across her arms and neck. Ray took a step forward. Lyra paused. Then she smiled. A real smile, not forced or weak. A smile that reached her eyes. "You look stronger," Ray said. Lyra nodded. "I feel stronger." They walked together along the garden path. Birds flew over their heads and flowers opened under the sunlight. No guards followed them. No cameras watched them. The council had allowed Lyra to walk freely during certain hours. She had earned that right. After saving the station, after risking everything, they could no longer call her a threat. Ray looked at her face. He remembered how it looked the first day they met. Pale, distant, silent. Now she stood beside him with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. "How much do you remember?" Ray asked. "I remember the chamber," she said. "I remember your stories, your music. I remember the fire. The pain, then I remember your voice calling me back." Ray felt his chest tighten. He looked away toward the water. "I thought I lost you," he said. "You found me again," she replied. They sat down on a low stone wall near the edge of the garden. Children from nearby. Families were playing across the stream. One small child from the Talari species walked toward Lyra. He had green skin and wide eyes. He stared at her without fear. Lyra looked down and gave a soft wave. The child smiled and reached out. Lyra gently touched his hand. A small light sparkled between their fingers. The child laughed and ran back to his friends. Ray watched the moment and smiled. "They are not afraid of you," he said. "They have no reason to be," she answered. A few days later, the council made a public announcement. Lyra would not be moved to the moon facility. Her actions during the emergency had proved her value and character. She was granted official asylum within Alliance space. A team of scientists was assigned to study her energy patterns, but only with her full agreement. She had rights now. She had a voice. Lyra chose to stay near the outpost for the time being. She did not wish to return to deep space. Her past was filled with pain and loss. The place where she had been feared had now become the place where she was seen. Ray was given a special role by the council. He was now a liaison between human and non-human relations. But he continued his visits with Lyra. Some called them friends. Others whispered more. Ray did not care what they said. What mattered to him was simple. Lyra had become more than just a name behind glass. She had become a part of his world. One afternoon they sat together watching the sky turn orange under the shifting dome lights. "Do you miss your world?" Ray asked. Lyra thought for a moment. "My world never wanted me. I was made to protect them, but they feared me when I grew stronger. They sent me away. I drifted in space for years before your people found me." Ray looked down. "I am sorry." Lyra placed her hand on his. "Do not be. You were the first to look at me and not step back. You were the first to speak and not shout. You saw me when no one else did." Ray held her hand gently. "There are others like you out there," he said. "Others who are feared for what they are. Maybe we can find them. Maybe we can help them too." Lyra nodded slowly. "I would like that," she said. A year passed. Stories of Lyra spread across planets. People who once believed she was a weapon now spoke of her as a protector. Artists painted her in glowing colors. Children acted out stories about the girl with silver skin who saved a space station. Even the most doubtful voices had grown quiet. Lyra had become a symbol of something greater. She had shown that fear does not have to lead to hate. That kindness can break walls thicker than steel. That even the most misunderstood being can hold the power to heal rather than destroy. Ray and Lyra stood on a balcony looking out at the stars. A new mission had been approved. They would travel together to visit outer colonies. They would speak to leaders and scientists. They would build trust where fear had taken root. Ray looked at her and smiled. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra took a breath and looked at the stars. "I am ready to be more than what they feared. I am ready to be who I am." And so they stepped forward together, a human and a once feared being. No longer prisoner and visitor, no longer watcher and subject. Just two lives walking toward a future made not of fear but of understanding. Their story had begun in silence and shadows. It now moved into light. The end.